We thank you for these gifts of food which you bring forth from the earth. We thank you for the community which we share together as Jews and Christians who have faith in the one God. We thank you for the privilege of responsibility and gifts and leadership in a world in a time that is more turbulent than most of us can ever recall. And above all, we thank you for the hope that is ours in the ultimate redemption that you will bring about when the knowledge of you covers the earth as the waters covers the sea. Until that time, may we be faithful to serve you together, to seek to bring about good for all, as you promised you would do through Abraham and his seed. I offer this prayer in your great name. Amen.
I think we may be on the threshold, because last night's event, that ecumenical center, everyone together, different religions, different backgrounds, coming together to listen to a talk about Israel, to me, that is a coming redemption. But I didn't think it could be outdone except by this breakfast. Why? Look, I grew up in this country many years ago. Back in the early 60s, Jews were an ethnic group. We're actually an identifiable ethnic group. Only Jews ate bagels. They were small, they were hard, they were miserable. Only Jews ate lox. I went to Israel to get away from Jewish food. It has followed me. I got away. My uncle used to say, "You don't like chopped liver? You're not Jewish. You're not Jewish. You don't like whitefish? You're not Jewish." It's followed me to Israel. Every breakfast now is whitefish, bagels, everything. And here we are at this beautiful club. And I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years ago when I was a kid, they said, "What a bagel? What's a bagel?" Here it is. Here they're being served at this table. I think it's a messianic moment. I really do. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Great. And even I appreciate it as someone who hates bagels and lox. I say this, as a jocular introduction to a very, very hard topic. October 7th, you've probably heard it many times, is the largest single massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. It was, for Israel, it represented not just the butchering, the raping, the burning, the incarceration and captivity of close to over 1,400 of our citizens, the overwhelming majority of them civilians, the overwhelming majority of civilians who were living in that area because they believed in peace. These are people who would go out on a morning and meet Gazans at the border to bring them for free medical care in Israel. These were people who flew kites over Gaza, and I'm not kidding you, every Friday that says, "We want peace with you." These were the most peace-minded people. It was a shock, a trauma in which the people of Israel remain deeply, deeply embedded today. We are not on October 8th yet. We actually aren't. But to understand the true significance of October 7th is to not look at October 7th, it's to look at May 1948. May 1948, the 14th of the month, was the day that Israel was created. It was created 3 years almost to the date after the end of the Holocaust. VE Day, May 8th, 1945. End of the Holocaust. A Holocaust in which 1 out of every 3 Jews in the world was killed. Can you imagine? Imagine in your community, 1 of every 3 people. And the Jewish people turn around with 600,000 people, the size of Boston today, in a country with no resources, no allies, have to fight a war of national survival against 6 invading armies that want to kill them, not defeat them, but to strive them into the ocean. A war of national annihilation is very, very rare. World War II, America didn't want to destroy Germany and Japan, just wanted to defeat their government. Very rare in history. And all this is in 3 years, but the state of Israel comes into being, not just any normal state, it comes into being on the basis of a covenant. And the covenant says something like this. The state of Israel is coming into being to ensure that that doesn't happen again. That's what we're about. We're going to defend the land and people of Israel. And then there was another covenant that says, if we go to battle and your parents, your brothers, your kids are taken prisoners, then the state of Israel will do everything possible to redeem those hostages. Those of us who remember the Entebbe raid in 1976, Netanyahu's brother falling in that raid, that's what it was about. Who sends an army halfway across the world to rescue hostages because it's part of the covenant. Hamas, on the morning of October 7th, hit us between the eyes. Not these eyes, but the eyes of our identity, the pronoun eye. The eye that says the state exists to defend its citizens and its border, and the state exists to redeem hostages. Because with the 240 hostages, how then do we defend our borders? Because the easiest thing in the world for Israel to have done was to go into Gaza, fill up the 450 miles of tunnels that Hamas has dug beneath Gaza, and fill them up with gasoline and say, okay, who's got a match? And it would have been over. It would have been over in a second. But we couldn't do that because of the hostages. And so we had to try to do the impossible. We had to, on one hand, fight Hamas, defeat Hamas, and on the other hand, free the hostages. And at a certain level, those two goals are incompatible because Hamas won't release the end of the hostages because they know that at least the last hostages are released, that's when the tunnels get filled with gasoline, and that's where someone gets the match. So we're caught in a bind. And I must tell you, as an historian, not as an Israeli, as an historian, I know of no government in history that has had to face that type of horrendous dilemma. None whatsoever. And maybe another country, maybe not this country, but I can think of other countries in the world would have said on the same day, well, we lost X number of people in this battle. We have some prisoners. We're going to have to understand that the prisoners' lives are lost too. We're going to have to count them among the victims already. But not in the world would do that. There were plenty of American prisoners taken on December 7th and 8th, 1941, in various places, in the Philippines, in Guam. America didn't hesitate to go to war against Japan. Didn't say, well, listen, to go to war, they're liable to kill the prisoners. Very similar situation, but here, this goes deeply, deeply. I'll give you, I'll prescient. I have two children, a daughter who says, Abba, Father, we lost the war on October 7th. The whole question about winning the war is irrelevant. We have to acknowledge that we lost the war, and Israel has to do everything possible to get the hostages back. Because if we don't get the hostages back, I will not be able to send my kids to the army. My son Yoav says, Abba, if we don't defeat Hamas, Leah, my daughter, will not have an army to send the kids to. And guess what? They're both right. They're both right. I don't think any Israeli I know would disagree with either one of them, even though they're incompatible. And that's what we're fighting. Understand that this is a war not about borders. It's not even about security. It's about national survival. Why? If we lose the war, what do we mean the war? If Hamas somehow emerges, it survives because we have to win, but all they have to do is survive. If there is a ceasefire, and ceasefire is the most positive role. Who wouldn't want a ceasefire? People stop shooting one another. But understand, a ceasefire means Hamas wins. Ceasefire means that Hamas gets away with mass murder. Ceasefire means that the 200,000 Israelis who have been displaced from our borders, who have not been able to go back to their homes now for close to 4 months and living in hotels. Amazing. Horrific. They won't be able to go back to their houses. Who is going to go back to the border knowing that Hamas is there? And Hamas leaders say openly that as soon as we come out of these tunnels, we're going to start planning the next round. They make no mistake. They make no effort to dissemble that in any way. They're very clear about it. We're going to do it again. And they say we're going to do it again and again and again. We'll do it 1,000,000 times until Israel is destroyed. You got to give them credit. They're very candid. Right? Who's going to go and raise your kids there? Again, knowing what they can do to children, to women, to the human body. I spoke to soldiers and aid workers who were there on October 7th. They said that these terrorists did things, everything you could imagine doing to a human body short of cannibalism. Who would live there? Who would live there? So that's just the beginning. We can't restore our internal security. Large swaths of Israel become uninhabitable. That's just the beginning of the nightmare. Every enemy we have in the region, particularly Iran, will conclude, and I think rightly, that they can hit us with impunity, and every time we go to defend ourselves, the world will slap a ceasefire on us, and we'll tie our hands until eventually we're destroyed. And so this is a war for national destruction, for national survival, both in the south and in the north, because large swaths of the north are now uninhabitable. The Galilee is largely uninhabitable right now. Hezbollah in the north is shelling us more fiercely than Hamas was. There's more rockets coming from the north into Israel than there were rockets coming in from the south. So on two borders, we're fighting this. And then on top of everything else, we are alone. I'm going to quote a very eminent source. This eminent source is my barber. You can quote all these different experts in the book. My barber said to me something that got to me. He said, the worst part of this is not the fact that our soldiers are being killed every day. We've now lost 221 soldiers. It's not the fact that the world doesn't understand that we're being hauled before the International Court of Justice and accused of genocide. We, the victims of genocide, the victims of genocide by a proudly genocidal organization. We're being critical. That's bad. The waves of anti-Semitism sweeping around the world, on campuses, all that is terrible. The worst thing for us is the feeling of loneliness. And when I say this to Israelis, everyone says, yes, that's it. It's the feeling of loneliness, that we're alone in the world and nobody's with us. The Chinese used to be very, very pro-Israel. There's no anti-Semitism in China. All of a sudden, China now, its official policy is anti-Semitism. They've erased Israel from all their maps. You won't find a Chinese map that has Israel on it anymore. Millions of bots, TikTok, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. Russia, of course. Europe wavering. And I can't imagine a more difficult moment than this. And here, America's support for Israel is hanging by a rather slender thread. America gives us two essential, I would even call them oxygen lines. What are they? One is ammunition, because we run low. I don't know if you know this, but beneath the state of Israel, underneath are warehouses containing $2 billion worth of pre-positioned American military equipment, put there by George Bush at the beginning of the century to support American forces in the Middle East. American forces have largely withdrawn, but the stuff is still there. And everyone understands that when we need it, we can go down to these warehouses, take what we need, and write it down, pay for it, and we can use it, particularly tank ammunition and artillery ammunition. Right now, first of all, there's a world shortage of ammo because of Ukraine, and they've taken out hundreds of shells from these warehouses and shipped them to Ukraine. But there's also the sense that as increasing pressure is on the administration to get Israel to agree to a ceasefire, they're going to start closing that spigot of ammunition. Last night, NBC reported that they were actually doing that. And that was in the news last night in the middle of the night, commenting about this. It's going to happen. But the other essential service is casting a veto in the Security Council. The Security Council is going to keep on trying to impose a ceasefire. The ceasefire, as I mentioned, is death. And the United States keeps casting those ceasefires. What can I say? You're in an election year. And the president's policy toward us is not particularly happy in certain large segments of his party. And he's under tremendous pressure because the administration is not one person, it's many, many people. They're probably coming to him and saying, what, are you crazy? You're jeopardizing our future, all right? Well, we're behind the polls. This is not going to help us in the polls. So it's a very, very slender thread. And people ask me all the time, what will we do if America cuts off the ammunition trail? And I'll say, if we have to, we'll throw rocks at these guys. Because we will, because we literally have no choice. It's a war of national survival. It's very rare in history, wars of national survival. There's a great clarity in having no choice. All this is extremely painful, extremely difficult. And the funerals, the shivas, the notion that when an Israeli soldier dies, it's not just some person with no name, it's your neighbor, it's your friend, it's your relative. It's all intensely personal. Here is the good news. And the good news is not just good news, it's extraordinary news. Last night I talked about the Cincinnatus nation, if those of you were here last night. Israel has proven to be the most resilient, the strongest society on the face of the earth. I know of no society like this. Society that actually doesn't wait for the state to give its order, but actually picks up a gun and goes out to fight. It's a Lexington and Concord moment. It's amazing. Hundreds of thousands of people picking up guns and going out to fight. But not just going out to fight, going out to hospitals, going out to orchards and picking fruit, because there's no one to pick the fruit anymore. It's giving blood. It's every type of activity that anybody can do. Everyone's desperate to do something. And I think that goes to the heart of our secret as a people. We're around for 4,000 years because of that resilience. And I know of other people that not only could make a state 3 years after the Holocaust, but of people who've been around since the time of Abraham and faced challenge after challenge after challenge. You read in the Bible this week, the Parsha, about Amalek. It's the great enemy of the Jewish people, tries to destroy us. Here in the inception of our identity as a people, someone's trying to destroy us. We have to overcome that. We've done it again and again because there's something very internally strong and resilient and indomitable about us. And for that reason, I remain very optimistic. I do, because that state that was founded on the basis of nothing, with nothing, produced one of the most successful nation states on earth. It's got, believe it or not, we have an army that's more than twice as large, more than twice as large as the British and French armies combined. The Citizens Army. We have a democratic system. We're the only country in the world, as I mentioned yesterday in the chapel, that's never known a second of non-democratic governance. 7 of the world's leading universities. We're rated usually 1 or 2 in terms of innovation. We vie with Switzerland. I guess they make high-tech clocks or something. I don't know what they do. Really high-tech something, these people, the Swiss. I mean, I could go on with many, many, many factoids. My favorite one is that we have more Nobel Prize winners than we have Olympic gold medal winners. And only a Jewish state would be really proud of that. Like a guy comes home, Mom, I won a gold medal. She's like, yeah, no, so where's your Nobel Prize? All that. There's something very, very special about this place. And I have a personal thing. I've lived in Israel now. Sometimes they ask me how I got there. I got there in the 70s with a backpack. There was nothing. It was the Wild West. We didn't have relations with China, India, Soviet Union. We had no relations with Africa, no relations with South America. We had a nice relationship with the United States, but not that strategic alliance that I talked about last night. No peace with Egypt, no peace with Jordan, no peace with the UAE, and Bahrain and Morocco. None of that. The food was terrible. The falafel was bad. Now we have culinary tours to Israel. This is the strangest thing. People come to Israel for the food. You know, bizarre. All that, and you cannot have that historical perspective and my personal perspective without being optimistic. And even the gloomiest days, and these are very gloomy days, is to see beyond the gloom and to see why we're going to prevail. We're going to prevail. Whether it's through rocks or through ammunition for the United States, we're going to prevail because we have no choice and also because of who we are. We are the Jewish state. Not just a name. There's something intrinsically, inherently resilient about that. And we will win. We will win. Questions? Please eat. Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you so much for coming to Ocean Reef, and your presentation yesterday was clear, and I'm personally very grateful. I'm sure everybody here is as well for your presence, so thank you for everything you do. I have a 2-part question. My first question is, you're preaching to the congregation. We're souls. How do you take your message and translate that to the masses? Because that's the problem, I think, personally. That's my first part of the question. My second question is, Israel has a Trump card. We've got nuclear weaponry.
That's not a political pun.
So does Pakistan. Iran arguably has nuclear weaponry as well.
Yes.
So there may come a time. Israel, we're going to fight to the end. We're going to fight with rockets, with rocks, with stones, perhaps with nuclear weaponry. Where will that lead us? When's that breaking point going to come?
Well, the first question is actually strange enough the harder question. How do you get the message out to the masses? And we've talked about this with various people here about fighting TikTok and fighting this, and I don't know if it's a surmountable battle, but it's certainly an uphill one. Because, I mentioned briefly that on October 7th, October 8th, this is a question that remains to be answered, both China and Russia issued millions of bots, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas bots. How they knew that in advance, we don't know yet, but they're there. And what countries, even the United States of America, has the ability to combat that? It's overwhelming. We mentioned to somebody earlier that on October 8th, there were already pro-Hamas demonstrations at American streets and campuses. How did that happen? That was not spontaneous. That was driven. That was spurred through social media. And yes, let's make a comeback. I'll be talking about our social media initiative this morning, the Israel Advocacy Group, because we work in this space. We work in a very specific space. We're looking at what we call the silent majority. Those people who are not pro-Israel and anti-Israel, those people who haven't made up their mind yet. And it's exactly what you're talking about, getting the facts to them. And it's not just the facts. It has to be, we're in a post-factual world. Okay, where, you know, if a feeling meets up with a fact, you know who wins. If you've ever been in a relationship, you know what wins, all right? The feelings, right? Tammy's laughing. Whenever you get a fact, you know, wait a minute, I cleaned the bathroom. No, but you don't love me, all right? Okay, what's going to win? What's going to win? But that, you know, same thing. And, you know, don't bother me with facts. Now the facts are that they're saying, listen, October 7th was fabricated. Never happened. It's IA. It's Israel did it. I mean, really. It's very closely related to Holocaust denial. They're very closely related. October 7th and a Holocaust denial are very, very closely related. Combating that is not easy. It requires resources, tremendous amount of resources. So I can give you facts. Oh my God. A fact I gave on the radio last night at 3 o'clock in the morning. Here's an interesting fact. I don't know if I gave this yesterday. Tell me if I'm repeating myself. I talked about the accusation that we are killing Palestinians indiscriminately. Did I talk about this yesterday?
No.
Okay, here's it. What?
To me, not to everybody.
Okay. To me, you represent every man, and you're every. I'm telling you, I'm telling everybody. And this is a cruel statistic, so brace yourself. Hamas regularly inflates all casualty figures. I mean, I go back with Hamas casualty figures going back to the 1990s. The great one in 2008, 2009, Operation Cast Lead. I was still in the military then. They claimed one night that we just struck a UNRWA school with two mortar shells and killed 51 kids. And it took a couple of days to investigate. The mortar shells fell outside the school, killed 12 Hamas members, didn't kill a single child. But it was already all over the world. We're now child killers. That's how it works. So let's leave that aside and assume that Hamas's number of 25,000 Palestinians killed, civilians, is a right number. And of the 25,000, 10,000 are children. Now, this number is routinely, unquestionably repeated by the American press. You'll read it every morning in the New York Times. You'll hear it on CNN. You heard it on MSNBC. Absolutely unassailable. There it is. It's a fact. That's a fact. Okay. The Israeli army is very accurate reporting every terrorist it has killed. We have killed 10,000 terrorists. Take 10,000 out of the 25,000 because they include the 10,000 in the 25,000. All right. Now you're down to 15,000. We also know that about 30% of the Palestinian casualties are caused by Palestinian rockets falling short. That's, if you remember, the Al-Ahli hospital incident, where Hamas said a rocket hit a hospital and killed, an Israeli bomb hit a Palestinian and killed 500 people. And then it turned out within an hour, the United States knew it, we knew it, that it wasn't an Israeli bomb, it was a Palestinian rocket falling short. It didn't hit the hospital, it hit the parking lot. And not 500 people were killed, but 550 people were killed. Okay. By that point, half the world had already reported. New York Times had a huge banner headline. Israel kills 500 people in a hospital. So let's take off the 30%, and then you're down to something like, say, 12,000 Palestinian casualties versus 10,000 combatants killed. It's a ratio of just over 1 to 1. America's involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, the ratio was 4 to 1. Civilians to combatants killed. NATO's involvement in Kosovo in 1999, 4 to 1. It's a macabre statistic. I don't want to brag about it too much, but the efforts that Israel takes to reduce civilian casualties is something of a world record in modern warfare. There's been no conflict that has reached this proportion. Now get that fact out against this massive delegitimization, which, by the way, ends up in La Hague. It doesn't stay on the stages of the New York Times. But the whole thing is a classic blood libel. It's just a lie. And it's a pernicious, deeply damaging lie. And it's an example, but it's still a fact. And we have to go, not just for facts, we have to go for feelings. And the feelings I would go for, and we were talking about this before, Bob, is that this is not a battle between Hamas and Israel. It's not even a battle between Israel and the Palestinians. It's a battle between this civilization and darkness and evil. And if we don't win, it's coming here. At some point, it's coming to Ocean Reef. It'll probably come to France and Britain first. But really, they're next in line. But it will come. It won't stop. Believe me, they'll say it won't stop. Yeah.
Just to build on what you were saying earlier, I think this is as much an information war as anything else, because all of the statistics are really important to hear, but it's dumbfounding that the information that got out there so fast, to your point, on the next hour, vis-a-vis TikTok, 50% of the viewership coming from kids in the demographic that are marching in the street, right? The narrative and the language they use is all the same. It's impossible that that was just organic. It's impossible. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the
Neither am I. We have
triangulation
some questions that
between
remain
who
to
owns
be answered.
TikTok
Yeah.
and what their position is,
Yeah.
the message that got out there, and who they targeted. They targeted subordinate group members in colleges, LGBTQ specifically. In what universe would that group be able to thrive in a region like this? Zero.
Queers for Palestine.
So-
Like I said before, it's like
But it's
nuns
not-
for group sex. I mean, really. I mean, if you're gay in Gaza, they're going to string you up.
But the-
Okay.
It's not an accident, and I
What?
think we can look at Zelensky, it's not an accident.
I get so thrown out of Princeton for that today.
It's not an accident, I just
Right.
really
Right.
implore the focus go to the digital information part
Yeah.
as much as the physical war, because here we sit as victims of a situation that's a conversation that's not true, again. So I'm just curious about the thoughts that the TikTok piece of this is 50% of the time in the mind space of the people who are walking and protesting and screaming with no knowledge at all, owned by China. And so I don't know, and Israel's a tech country, right? We love the
We're a
progress.
tech country, and our NSC is probably the third or fourth largest what's called collection agency in the world, because it gathers information. After the CIA, MI6, and what the China does, we don't know, but we're up there. And it's a crucial pillar in our relationship with the NSC here in this country, NSA. It's going to take massive amounts of resources. And it actually requires a decision on the part of the United States government saying, okay, we're going to combat this because this is a threat to our security. You have to recognize this as a threat to national security. We have made this transition several years ago. We had three branches of the military. We had air, sea, and land. Now cyber is larger than all of them. Larger than all of them. Because we understand that you can have the greatest tanks in the world, the greatest planes and pilots in the world, but if you do not have time and space, they will not be able to fly, they will not be able to move. I like to think of myself, Tammy and I both, we were in the time and space business. I'm beyond the point, alas, where I can carry a rifle. Sometimes I wish I could be better off doing that. I'm sure the Army would not agree with me. But we're in the business of giving time and space for the Army to do what it has to do. Because time and space, you see, is constricting every day as we're sitting here. Every day. Sir, Michael.
You mentioned the loneliness that Israel is facing now. Can you tell us what it's like for the Israeli citizens living in Israel day to day now with this war? What are they feeling?
They feel several things. There's a fear of printing on the news. Because there's always going to be something maybe horrible happening. 21 soldiers killed the other day in a collapsed building. And you know you're going to know somebody, because there's not 5 degrees of separation, it's usually half a degree of separation. I can't tell you how many people I know personally who were either kept hostage or killed on October 7th, including the 2 sons of the rabbi who married my daughter, 2 sons, beautiful boys, both of them reservists in elite units. They got up, they heard on the radio that morning that there was an attack. They both put on their uniforms. They left their families, kissed their kids, kissed their wives goodbyes, ran down to the south, and both were killed on the same morning. Buried side by side in Jerusalem. The young woman who was in the scouting troop with my kids and studied karate with my kids, and she, her husband, 3 kids, all shot and killed, and kibbutz Nachalos that morning. I mean, there's half a degree of separation. You know them all. So you feel that. You feel the sorrow, and you feel the fear, and the sense that the war is coming toward you. So I have a daughter who lives in the lower Galilee, so the Hamas rockets haven't hit the lower Galilee yet. They only hit upper Galilee, but she knows it's a matter of time before they hit lower Galilee. It's only a matter of time. So that sense, you look at your kids, and you look and see whether many of our houses have bomb shelters in them, looking for your bomb shelters, okay, stack up food. We moved a bed into our bomb shelter. We moved a box of food into the bomb shelter just in case. So that's one feeling. The other feeling is we can't lose, that this is a war of no choice. And it's fascinating. Here we've been at war for 116, 117 days. with tremendous losses proportionally in the United States. In America, just in terms of what happened October 7th, we lost 1,200 people. That would be the equivalent of America losing 52,000 people on the same day. It's almost as many people you lost in 10 years of the Vietnam War in one day. What does that do to a society? So we understand that there's no choice. We cannot let this happen. We can't let it happen to our kids, to our family. So there's that determination. So it's interesting, after 117 days of war, there has not been one anti-war protest. Protests against Bibi all the time. Protests by the hostage families to, make concessions to Hamas to get the hostages back. Okay, hostage, but not one anti-war demonstration. Someone's coming out and saying, stop the war. Because they know it can't. And so that they have that also as well. It's disruption. So I have for IAG, I have three male assistants, colleagues who work for me. Two are in Gaza, one are in the West Bank. And there's lots of fighting in the West Bank too. One of my assistants was 52 straight days in combat. Now I spent 35 years in the military. I've been through several wars. I have never been through anything more than 2 or 3 days of straight combat. I can't imagine what it was like to be 52 straight. He says it's 24/7. He told me everything is booby-trapped. The cats are booby-trapped. The roosters are booby-trapped. The kids are booby-trapped. You walk down a street and you don't know if there's an opening of tunnel you can't see, someone's going to pop up and shoot you. So 24/7, you never get a moment's rest. You're constantly stressed, exhausted, in the rain, in a toxic environment, because Gaza had no sewage treatment at all. So the whole place is a sewer, and being shot at from every different angle. And the emotional cost of this is incalculable. So we have now thousands of soldiers who've been through this experience coming out with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and then you have the entire parts of the country that have been under rocket fire, 12,000 rockets, post-traumatic stress syndrome. 200,000 people have been displaced, who are now in hotels and all sorts of houses around the country. That is stress. Can you imagine that? Your disruption to your family. So all of this is going on in this tiny country the size of New Jersey at the same time. And again, I just want to, at the risk of sounding redundant, the fact that this society has not shown any cracks just attests once again to the deep, profound resilience of the place. It's astonishing to me. Tam's out getting ready to do a podcast, but we live in South Tel Aviv, Jaffa, and we have a bomb shelter. And the bomb shelter has a bulletproof window, they all do. And through that window, I can see all the rockets coming toward Tel Aviv. We're on Rocket Alley. And we have an Iron Dome battery not far from us, and we can actually watch them. If you want to see this, I have this on my cell phone later. You can actually see the rockets being hit one after another, and they shake the whole building. It's quite a boom. Not everybody can take it. Not everybody can take it, but most of us just sort of go on with our lives. Oh, someone just fired a very large rocket that could take down your entire building and try to kill you. Okay, they didn't. Let's get dinner ready. The biggest casualty we have in my house is my cat. I have an ADHD cat who's now going through post-traumatic stress syndrome. And when the sirens go off, the sirens are very kind of spooky. The cat runs up the stairs into the bomb shelter. How the cat knows this, I don't know. But he is intuiting something very thick. The cat understands that someone's trying to kill us, and they have to be in a bomb shelter. And he huddles in the corner of this bomb shelter. It's quite amazing. I'll get everybody. We'll get everybody. Let me get this different.
You really haven't touched on this, but I think that both parties right now, we're going obviously into the election, but the far right and the far left, I think, are going to really create a situation where it's going to be very difficult to appropriate money that is needed for Israel. I think it's going to come from both sides, because they have both shown that they're not interested in really giving money for anything outside of the United States, that is, Ukraine, Israel. And I think that we can see what's happening on our Congress now. They can't get anything done. How is that going to affect Israel? I don't see this as a short-term thing. I think that whether we like it or not, the right and the left in these parties have taken a lot of control. And I think on both sides, we are going to feel that.
As I think I intimated last night, that one of the few issues that used to gain bipartisan support in Washington, there's not many, is isolationism. America's gone through a long period of isolationism. It's sort of breaking the historical mold that usually says after a difficult war and an economic upheaval, there's a period of isolationism. That's the 1920s. But then it ended. It ended with the outbreak of World War II. We don't see where this ends. Maybe it ends now. And yes, there are isolationist tendencies on both sides of the aisle. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't cost America anything to put a veto down the Security Council. It's totally free. And Israel's less interested in money than it is actually in artillery shells, to the degree that those are available.
And they have to be appropriated. And
Appropriated,
there has to be vote, and they vote. So it's, you can't
But it's
say
not
they're
massive
interested in money.
sums like you'd think. I mean, it's not. It's in the tens of millions. It's not in the hundreds of millions. We need enough ammo. And as they say, it's ammos and vetoes. That's what we need from the United States. And I don't think any of them are particularly heavy lifts. They are politically difficult. Last I was looking very carefully at the news. What was going to be the Biden administration's response to the militia attack that killed the 3 American servicemen? Apparently also seriously wounded 35. It hasn't been out. It's not just 3 million people killed. It's the 150th attack on American bases. And the Democrats immediately came out and said, let's be careful with the response. Let's not respond against attack. There was a high-level source quoted in the Pentagon saying, what will we get by responding to Iran? Quote unquote. What are we going to get out of it? I mean, I know what you're going to get out of it by not responding to Iran. You're going to get the next attack. Okay, but that's the Weltanschauung. That's the Zeitgeist. We're using German words in much of the party that's of government right now in the executive. By contrast, Lindsey Graham and other people coming out and saying, listen, you've got to take Iran to task. This is the time to hit Iran. It certainly is the time to hit Iran. I agree with this. I'm not being partisan here, of course.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but Lindsey Graham is not running that party right now, and we don't know what will happen.
We don't. People are always going to ask me, what would Trump do? What would Trump do? I think Trump will do 2 things. I'm going to go on the limb. I don't know if he would strike Iran. I do not. I know that he would keep up the ammo supply laws, and I know he would put down the vetoes. Okay, to me, that's crucial right now. That's absolutely crucial. Now, I hope I'm not being too partisan, not here to take sides, but I have a strong feeling about that, without being able to adduce any empirical evidence to the fact, but okay, I have a strong opinion about it. Bill?
Yes. You're preaching kind of the to converted here.
Yeah.
And the question has to do with those that are not converted, like the students in the east, northeast. I just think that if you had a PR campaign that said, here's what happened to us, and you showed them what happened to you, because people say that's too much base kind of thing that we don't want to show. I think that would convert some of these people into saying, and would give you the momentum to build on. I just don't understand why you say, wait, we can only show you this up to a certain point. And then they just, the kids are interviewed and they don't know. They just don't know. And so they tip to the liberal side.
It's a very sensitive topic you're talking about, and it's been raised again and again and again. So we have a 47-minute film of pictures taken from the GoPro cameras that were carried on the helmets and chests of the terrorists. Now, by the way, this distinguishes them from Nazis. The Nazis did every possible effort to hide the final solution. There's no picture of people going into gas chambers. There's maybe 1 or 2 pictures of Jews being shot in a ditch, but that's about it. Of 6 million people getting killed, there's almost no photographic evidence, because the Nazis understood that what they were doing would be abhorrent, even to the most virulent anti-Semite. Putting 10,000 to 20,000 people into a gas chamber. That was the daily rate at Auschwitz. And they have a hard time with it. And Hamas is completely different. Hamas was broadcasting to an enthusiastic audience. Look what we're doing to these people. Isn't this wonderful? They were celebrating it. They're completely, numerically, they can't compete with the Nazis, but in terms of horror, in terms of evil, they actually managed to succeed the Nazis. So we have now we've put together a 47-minute clip. Each scene is transformative. Each scene will haunt you the rest of your life. Okay? I don't recommend you see this. I don't. All right? You will not sleep.
That all plays in your favor.
It does, but there's two problems with it. One is we are very sensitive as a society to the privacy of an individual. And if your daughter, and I'm sorry for being graphic about this, if your daughter had her legs spread and nailed to the floor and her pelvis broken so that she could be raped by 20 men in a row, you would not want that broadcast around the world. Okay? Sorry for being graphic. This is what it shows.
But you're fighting for your life.
I understand that. The next thing is what's happened in the world, and this goes back to your question, Dan, is that people are going to look at this and say, oh, it's all fabricated. It's AI.
That's right.
We don't believe this. And there's another school of thought that is so brainwashed with what they've learned on these campuses and what they've learned on social media. They say, well, of course, these Israelis had it coming to them. Everything is forgivable because Israel is a white settler economy, white settler society. And so anything that the indigenous oppressed population is okay. What do you expect? This is built up rage. So it's going to be dismissed. So yes, we showed it to journalists. We showed it to decision makers on Capitol Hill. We did not show it publicly. And it had a certain effect, but I don't think it's a game changer. I don't think it's a game changer. I wish there was sort of that magic bullet there that we could do that. Just show a film and it's going to change everything. But right now, again, we're in that post-factual world where everything is being challenged and being impugned.
Has there been an attempt to contact celebrities and influencers
Yes.
to reach this younger
Yes. You do, but okay, we got up against the Susan Sarandons, and this morning John Cusack. Oh God, John Cusack have you seen this, Michael? Just one crazy anti-Semitic tweet after another. Crazy. So some of them, yes, have come out, and we're deeply appreciative.
Who have you seen that has the bravery to come forward?
Amy Schumer.
Bill Maher. Yeah, Bill Maher's amazing. I've been on his show a couple of times. He's incredible. Sarah, say it louder.
All these protests and stuff like that, trying to understand in their own communities who could be the bad people that could come.
Well, they have sleeper cells, and we've covered this out. Hamas has tried to carry out terrorist attacks in Europe. It's not imaginary. There actually are sleeper cells. And we know of Iranian sleeper cells that are along your border, along the Rio Grande. They're in South America. And I was the target of an attempted assassination in Washington. They sent assassins to kill me in Washington, D.C. in 2011. They didn't care. They knew the administration wouldn't strike back. They just knew it. Myself and the Saudi ambassador, we were supposed to be knocked off at a restaurant. It's in my memoir. It's an ally. That's an who calls me one day on a secure phone. He says, okay, sit down. You're sitting down? Take a deep breath. You just survived an assassination attempt. I didn't even know about it. So that's the kind of conversation you want every day. So I think European governments, let's take the French. French are interesting, the British. You should know that the French have outlawed pro-Palestinian demonstrations. There are none. Yeah, they outlawed it. Because they understand. So lip service, Macron is going to give a certain amount of lip service. Oh, ceasefire, this and this. He knows. They're afraid because they are a democracy, 11% Muslim, and they want to get reelected. On the other hand, they also want to survive. And they're in that delicate balance. But the French have been unusually less pesky this time than they are in previous rounds because they understand what's at stake. The British, the same thing. And so far, none of them are really pressing hard for a ceasefire. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we should have a ceasefire, but they're really pressing for it because they understand that if we lose, they are dead. They are dead. And think about it the way someone in Hamas or ISIS will think about this. All right? The West just didn't stand behind, the ally that's fighting on the front line. Now we can get these guys. Of course, they'll be celebrating around the world. So that's a delicate dance. I hope it continues. It's a harder argument to make in the United States, but it's certainly true. Who's next? Get everybody. Let me get this gentleman in the back because he's very, I'll get her. I'm not going anywhere. The bagels are here.
Maybe to shift to a more
Right.
optimistic note, imagine Gadadameron comes, Hamas falls, now you've got to do something next. Like, no one knows exactly what it looks like, but I'm just curious what the shape of success would actually look like. Because, you had Al-Qaeda, then you had ISIS. Who knows what's after Hamas, but it's not nothing.
All right, so let me be clear. If I said this last night, forgive me. We cannot defeat Hamas. We can't defeat the idea of Hamas. Because the idea of Hamas is the same idea as ISIS, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood. They're all exactly the same. It's not an idea, it's a theology. And the theology says we are divinely ordained to recreate the medieval caliphate in the Middle East, to unite the Middle East under Islamic rule, and then expand that rule to encompass the entire globe. Hamas is distinguished only because they have a different order of priority. First, we have to destroy Israel, create a Palestinian Islamic state, not a secular state, and then that state will expand to include, that'll be the sort of a launching pad, okay? A springboard. That's the only thing that distinguishes Hamas. We can't destroy that idea. That idea is deeply embedded into civilization and may take generations to extirpate, really to exercise that. What we can do is create a situation where Hamas does not rule Gaza anymore. Hamas cannot threaten us. And we know there are a lot of neo-Nazis running around the world, but they're a lot less dangerous because there's no Nazi Germany behind them. There's ISIS still in the world. It's a lot less dangerous because there's no Islamic State behind them. So we downgrade them in that way, and that's a threat we can deal with. I posted an article recently. Again, you can get it on the Substack on Clarity, because it republishes my articles. It's called about the day after. And the day after looks something like this. Demilitarization of Gaza has to be demilitarized. No more rockets, no more rocket workshops, no more arsenals. De-radicalization, which is actually more difficult. Internationalization, so that Gaza won't be an Israeli problem or an Israeli Egyptian problem, because it isn't. It's obviously an international problem, so let's have an international solution. International force with a large inter-Arab component, which will supervise reconstruction. Okay? But Israel has to maintain security control. You can't assume that soldiers from Belgium are going to guard our borders. They're not. You see what happens with every UN peacekeeping force in the Middle East. They're very good as long as there's no peace actually to keep. Okay, they're great. They're great. But there's actually a peace to keep, that's when they disappear. And the hardest achievement, the hardest challenge will be to find an indigenous Palestinian leadership that actually cares more about their kids and their children's future than they do about denying our kids a future, denying kids a life. And that is extremely difficult. I've been involved in the peace process for 30 years now. And finding that, we've never been able to find that leadership. I've not really found that leadership. And a big challenge. And that, again, it's not going to happen overnight. Everyone thinks it's going to be like, they say peace now. No, it begins in the classroom. A Palestinian child, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank too, is taught from the earliest age that the best thing they can do in life, the most sacred task they can fulfill, is killing a Jew. And killing a Jew not just with a gun, okay? And if you want to, I'll show you. This is now a great collection, like a montage, taken from Hamas TV, Sesame Street. Where in Sesame Street, they teach you how to stab, murder. They have one where a little puppet kills the president of the United States with a knife and then converts the White House into a mosque. This is what they're watching on TV. Then they go to summer camp, they learn this. They learn this in kindergarten. They put on plays. They have pictures of some of these plays. What occurred on October 7th was shocking, but it wasn't surprising. And I'm putting this in a broader context, and I've taken some flack for saying this, so brace yourself, here comes the flack. What they did to us on October 7th is no different than what they do to one another in Syria. You think that Assad didn't do the same thing to the people of Syria? You think that the Iran regime doesn't do the same thing to its protesters? We are dealing with a medieval society in many ways. It's a medieval way of warfare. That's what people used to do in the 12th century. They came in, raped your women, and cut your head off. And so this is what we're up against. To understand that is very difficult. And that's to undo that. We talked about last night, when you was here, we talked about, what are you going to do about the university system? We talked about Barry Weiss's university in Texas and undoing the 50 years of brainwashing on American campus. Undoing this will take 2 or 3 generations. First step, by the way, is getting rid of UNRWA. And it's UNRWA is one of the great obstacles to peace, and that the Biden administration renewed the support from UNRWA after Trump had cut it off was a terrible blow to the Palestinians. It's the worst thing you can do for the Palestinians is teach their kids that the only way they can advance through life is by destroying the state of Israel. And that's basically what UNRWA is. And it also creates a situation where it's the only refugee problem. By the way, UNRWA is the only organization that is for one refugee problem. All other refugees in the world, we're talking about hundreds of millions of refugees, including the millions of refugees who came from Syria and Iraq, are all controlled by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. The Palestinians have their own refugee organization, but it's completely different. It's the only organization in the world that where refugee status is passed on from father to son. So if your great-great-grandfather was a refugee, you're a refugee. Did you know this? No. And it's the only organization in the world that even if you have citizenship in another country, like you could be a Palestinian in Jordan and you're still getting UNRWA support. And you only get it if you remain in a refugee camp. Guess what? Everyone remains in a refugee camp because they get money. So it perpetuates the conflict. And then it teaches the kids that you got to destroy the other side. They're not teaching the two-state solution. They're not teaching coexistence. They're teaching just the opposite. So now everyone's shocked. It's like that scene in Casablanca. Shocked to find out that UNRWA teachers were involved in October 7th. Oh, what a shock. We've been saying this for years, that they're deeply embedded with terror. And I make a prediction that the administration will renew the support from UNRWA within a couple of weeks. Because what's going to do? They're going to say, oh, you fired the people and UNRWA's going to come back. Now we've taken all these steps now to ensure that this will never happen again. Money's going to be back. Because I do not see the Democratic Party cutting off educational aid to the Palestinians in an election year. Just don't. Agree? Yes, sir.
What does post-war Israeli politics look like with Netanyahu, who has lost the support of 70% of the Israeli public?
Yeah.
What does it look like? You know, there was so much, like the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States who were polarized. Israel was polarized. Some say that took their eye off the ball. What does post-war Israel look like politically?
It's going to be a period of profound upheaval. Now, I've learned one thing for the last, being in government for years, is that it's always premature to eulogize Mr. Netanyahu politically. He's been in the last year of his government for about 10 years now. It's just every year, okay? So no, in fact, he's actually, Likud, his party has primaries, and he's leading in the primaries by a significant majority, because in Likud, not only do they like, Likud is not a party, it's a family. And Bibi's the patriarch. And yeah, maybe he screwed up, but he's still our dad. And I live in a working class neighborhood. Believe me, that's what they feel. Very similar, sort of a play on what happens here with Trump and working class, say, non-college educated white people. And he is not of that ilk. He's from a different class. He's very educated. Bibi, similar. Very educated from an Ashkenazi background. But he's beloved of the non-college educated Sephardic working class. That's my neighborhood. They love Bibi. Very similar to what goes on. Very similar dynamic. And every charge against Bibi, and he's been accused of corruption on this, actually strengthens him. Every strengthens him. Does that sound familiar to you? Because it's the establishment going after our man. All right? Strengthens him. It's a witch hunt. It's very, very similar. But having said that, at the end of the day, he is mortal. And, he's had some health difficulties. We have to say there's going to be a post-Bibi situation somewhere, all right, some point. And what does that look like? Likud goes way down because no one has the prestige and the experience that he has. New people are coming up. But the fact of the matter is everybody in Israeli politics, everybody today, is tainted by October 7th. Whether it be the former chiefs of staff, even Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, everyone bought into the notion that you could buy off Hamas. Everybody was asleep at the wheel. Right? There wasn't a single leader that said, hey, we're liable to get attacked by these people. Never. But you're going to have a new generation of Israelis coming up who are coming out of Gaza. And these people are steeled, and they're intensely patriotic. We've had units now that have been in Gaza for 70 days of combat have come out and said they don't want to demobilize. They want to keep fighting. This is the next generation of Israeli leaders. They're great leaders. It'll take 10 years before these people who are in their 20s, maybe their early 30s, because they're ready for prime time. But I think they're going to be running. And so I think the prognosis for the future is very positive. But before we get there, there's going to be a lot of upheaval.
They even have, I think, a group, like they were going to be a political party of the.
So it's the Brothers and Sisters of Arms. We're an anti-Bibi group, very profound. My former chief of staff from Washington is the head of that. And very anti-Bibi group. They did a 60 Minutes thing on her. They're great people. But they're definitely going to, there's something to politicize in some way into a party. The problem is that they too are tainted, but in a strange way. What is it? They spearheaded the refusal movement, saying we won't report for reserve duty until Bibi steps down, or at least he steps down from the judicial reform program. So tens of thousands of reservists said they wouldn't report for duty. Among them, many pilots, and believe me, Hamas was taking notes. And in the right, they're saying, okay, you guys can form a political party, but you bear responsibility for October 7th. They'll deny that. But already, in other words, they're starting off on a political thing. They're already a very partisan issue. And I mentioned what I just said to you to some of my friends who were profoundly anti-Bibi, and they want to take my head off. They yell at me. How these people are heroes? They're heroes. The fact of the matter is, Hamas was taking notes. And, everybody takes notes on everybody. They do. Listen, when America withdrew from Afghanistan the way it withdrew from Afghanistan, Mr. Putin was taking notes. Anybody didn't answer? Yeah, get a question? Yes, ma'am.
Do we know the fate of the hostages? Are they alive? Are they not alive? A lot of people ask me that.
Okay. We don't. Listen, we know a number of them are dead. Okay, we just know a number of them are dead. From various ways, from forensic evidence, we know. Some of Hamas admitted. What I'm going to say now is very hard. Okay, we think there are about 136 hostages. Some, a number of them are bodies. We still want to get the bodies back. We have 2 soldiers who were killed in 2014. We're trying to get their bodies back. And Hamas knows we pay a price for bodies. We've done it again and again. It's a Jewish thing. A body is holy in Judaism, and for the closure for the families. I've heard one working assumption of 50 hostages alive. We don't know what condition they're in. They've been underground now for close to 4 months. Many of them had medical conditions. It is hard for me to imagine that Hamas will release any of the women who have been raped. I spent a lot of time visiting hostage families. And one of the hostage families I visited was an extraordinary family. I'm not going to mention the name. The daughter, 19-year-old soldier taken hostage. About a week and a half after I visited them, they found her body. And forensic evidence showed that she'd been raped dozens of times by different men and then taken out and executed. Hamas is, they got their PR people working. We don't want women coming out and saying they were raped. So we don't know. We don't know how many women they would release. We don't know. We don't know how many men were raped. I'm sorry for, I'm saying this at breakfast. This is the truth of the matter is. And then the big question is, would we agree to a 2-month ceasefire? This is what's being discussed now. 2-month ceasefire and release for a phased release of all the hostages. And on paper, it looks good, but I ask myself, first of all, how does Israel then restart the war for 2 months? And why would Hamas give up all the hostages? Because they know the minute they give up the last hostages, that's when the gasoline goes in the tunnels and someone gets the match. Why would they do that? They'll renege on it in some way. And then they've had a 2-month ceasefire, and it's very, very tricky. No country in the world has ever faced something like this. It's exquisitely nightmarish. It's the only one I can say. At the end of the day, and I say this at the risk of ad nauseum, there's no choice. There's just no choice. And we hope that by putting more pressure on them, they'll release more hostages. We have not, had the big bingo of hitting the highest level of Hamas leadership, Sinwar, because they're wrapped. They've wrapped themselves around hostages. I think we know where they are in the tunnel matrix, but we can't get to them because of the hostages. We can't even do that. We can't even kill these guys. It's so hard. And there's another factor I want to mention just before I go, and this is important because people forget this. What they're saying is, okay, we'll release the hostages, but Israel has to release all the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners in its jail. Now, what does that mean? What?
That's how just.
Well, Seymour was released in a prisoner exchange with Gilad Shalit. Okay, that's one thing. These guys all go back to terror, but that's the least of it. That's the least of it. How about all the families of people who were killed by these people in Israeli jails? The person who killed your daughter, the person who killed your son, is not going to go home. Your daughter, your son's not coming home, but they're going to go home to a hero's welcome. And guess what? Every terrorist who wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to kill a Jew, now knows, I'll kill a Jew and I'll sit in prison for a couple of years. They're going to get me out. And on the other side, they're going to say, all we have to do is take more hostages and we can trade them. So it's, when you say, oh, we'll let them out of the prison, as if, okay, that's an obvious thing. Oh, no, it's not obvious. It's devastating to Israeli society. Devastating. Imagine that in American context. Everybody who was in prison for life in prison for killing somebody, what would that do to those families? What would it do to the justice system? Makes a mockery of it, totally undermines it. I see, I got two more. Okay. Yeah.
Can you tell us?
I guess I got three more.
Tell us how we can help. Tell us a little bit more about Israel advocacy group
Okay, we'll
and the
do
work
that.
you're doing and how we
Let's
can
leave
help.
that. I'll leave that. And I'll guess this, please.
My feeling is that the hostages are already living dead.
You know.
And maybe it's cruel of me to say, but if they're lost, I believe they're lost mentally and physically already. So if we have to go in there and do something, how long can we wait?
Well, there's a school of thought. We said we should have done this on the first day. We just said, okay, we had 1,200 people killed. We're going to have another 240 people killed. We're going to save the government. We're going to save the country. What can we do? But the other argument is my daughter's argument, which is if we do not do everything to get the last hostages out, we will not be able to send our kids to the military. It's covenant time. It really is. It's about rebuilding a covenant between the state and its people. And we're unique in that way because we have that covenant. Having said all that, these are tough conversations this morning. They really are, and I hope I haven't ruined your day. It's a beautiful day out here in Ocean Reef. I'm a person full of hope. I just am. As we discussed, I'm a believing person. I'm a deeply believing person, and I know we're not alone, even when sometimes we feel we're alone. And I believe that we're here for a purpose, all of us. But I also think that Jewish people have a purpose in this world. There's a reason why we've come back to our homeland after 2,000 years. There's a reason why we're fighting this battle. And the spiritual dimension here is, for me, very, very important. We were talking before about how we never talk about battles between good and evil anymore. People don't believe there's evil in the world. And I remember a debate at Columbia University in 2008 between John McCain and Barack Obama, and they were asked, do you believe there's evil in the world? And McCain said, of course there's evil in the world. Obama equivocated. He sidestepped. It's not easy. Not many people believe that there actually is a thing. But I think that the evil and Satan work in this world. And one of our jobs here, whether it's in Ocean Reef or in Israel, is to stand up to it and defeat it at whatever price. I mean that. I cannot tell you how deeply I mean that. What we do is starting on October 7th, began a new initiative called Israel Advocacy Group. It grew out of necessity because I was on television 24/7, and what you'll see, I don't know if we have this rebroadcast. Can we put this up here in some way? Here? Oh, here it is, right behind me. Look at that. What do you know? Israel Advocacy Group began as simply an offer to keep me going because I needed an entire staff. For example, if I was in Cleveland and I had to get to Anderson Cooper at 7 o'clock in the evening, I had to get on a plane. Someone had to pay for that plane. Someone had to get back to the hotel, make all those arrangements, simply in order to get on there. All right. But then it expanded into areas of what's the Substack, which is my own magazine. It's called Clarity, which is now reaching hundreds of thousands of people and reprinted daily. I have a good cooperation with Barry Weiss's Free Press, which is terrific. She's great, Barry. It is op-eds, which you'll read in your newspapers. It is our own podcast of Clarity, and that required film people, studio, and social media. And the social media is designed, again, as I said before, aiming at the silent majority. People who are not necessarily pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian, or undecided. and almost no one's directing them. Some of them are directing a lot of them at the students who are already decided. But there may be limited efficacy to that because you're up against a very high wall there. But the vast majority of people aren't really engaged. And this way we want to get them engaged.